Today we're joined by Maria Palazzolo, who is the CEO of GS1 Australia. Maria has led and shaped industry initiatives across Australia throughout her 39-year career with GS1. During this period, Maria has held various management and executive roles, leading to her appointment as CEO 19 years ago. And I can vouch personally, Maria's strength lies in her passion, knowledge and business acumen, and unshakable belief that the future of GS1 is bounded only by its creativity. We're also very fortunate to be joined today by Jennifer Evans. Jennifer is the CEO of NATA, the National Association of Testing Authorities, a position she has held since May 2011. She holds a Bachelor of Applied Science, Medical Laboratory Science, and a Masters of Business Administration. She joined NATA in 1987 as a scientific officer, lead assessor in the newly established program for the Accreditation of Pathology Laboratories. As CEO, Jennifer has led significant organisational changes, including in the areas of accreditation, service delivery, ICT, stakeholder engagement, and most recently in NATA's communication and messaging. Last but not least, we're also joined by Catherine Lockyer. Catherine is the General Manager Services of JASANS, and she has 14 years experience working for certification in inspection bodies, and she joined the Joint Accreditation System of Australia and New Zealand in 2008. As I said, currently General Manager Services, Catherine has a deep understanding of accreditation activities with responsibility for ensuring that assessments are undertaken worldwide across a variety of schemes in the areas of management systems, inspection, product certification, personnel, and greenhouse gas verification. To our CEOs, thank you very much for joining us. Let's start by saying, in terms of the report, why have the three organisations partnered to address the issues as outlined in the report? And maybe if I ask you, Jennifer, to respond, and you're on mute.
Thanks, David. NATA and JASANS underpin product credentialing by providing accreditation of testing laboratories and certification bodies. But we're not expert in data systems. Once we understood how the existing architecture of product and document identifiers could be applied to conformity assessment information and accreditation information, and importantly, how product-related information could be linked to conformity assessment information and accreditation information, it was pretty obvious to us that we should reach out to GS1 Australia as the inventors of the barcode and custodians of product identifiers for retail products globally.
Thank you. And Catherine, from a JASANS perspective.
I think it's, when we looked at this, the opportunity to work with NATA and GS1 on this framework is really a necessary step in providing product suppliers and manufacturers with the ability to empower end users, and I think we have to think about that, empowering end users, with greater transparency in the integrity of the products they are purchasing. JASANS, NATA and GS1 recognise the importance of ensuring that the key for avoiding unnecessary costs is to ensure that information about product conformity is accessible from trusted sources rather than locked into various proprietary software solutions. So this is an essential step in ensuring industry is able to capitalise on an increasingly digitally connected world, such as widespread use of QR codes and mobile phones, and to quickly and easily scan physical documents to share digital conformity information. This leverages an increasing desire by consumers for full supply chain traceability and sustainability requirements.
Thanks, Catherine. Maria, from GS1 Perspective.
Thanks, David, and hello to everyone. Well, I think that we've established that actually it's a perfect relationship and a perfect match with the organisations that we're partnering with in this initiative. We're very complementary in the work that we all do, and we all have a very specific role to play. We, of course, as Jennifer said, are the experts in maybe the carriers, the technology, And we are very much committed to the mission. And strangely enough, our mission is very similar to the mission of NATA and GS1, which was something that wasn't really obvious until we started this partnership, to be honest. But we're very focused on national interest and helping organisations not only in our local markets, but also from a global perspective. And our membership, of course, is very important, but it's actually how we can enable industries to be more efficient and more effective by digitising the work that they do. And in this instance, we're talking about certificates, we're talking about safety information, safety data, accreditation, and all of that is absolutely paramount for trade. And we know this, and it's already very heavily embedded in processes. But what's not there at the moment, and the gap that we're trying to fill with this report, is actually taking all that information and digitising it so that the process is seamless, and of course using technology to enable us to do that.
So, thank you. And so I suppose, Jennifer, why for all the panel, why are global data standards important for product conformity and accreditation processes?
It's a good question, David. Look, at the present time, laboratories and certification bodies have their own systems for generating, for identifying, and for transmitting their documentation. By documentation, I mean their reports or their certificates. There is also the credentialing of those facilities via accreditation by NATA or GS1, or by organisations in other economies that are similar to NATA and GS1. Given that there are hundreds of thousands of laboratories and CBs around the world, there is, well, it's very unlikely that there's ever going to be a way of unifying or linking those systems to create a single source of truth, single source of reliable information. A global system of unique identification for each piece of information is needed, which of course can be achieved only by adopting globally agreed standards. Now, using agreed identification protocols will unlock an ability to transparently verify product attestations, and in turn allow those verified attestations to be digitally linked to product batches or product shipments through the magic of barcoding or something similar.
Maria, your thoughts?
Yes, well, you know, obviously we're not talking about looking at a framework for solutions that's based on, you know, a single company or even a single industry. We're talking about an entire ecosystem globally and locally. And if you don't have a common approach, a common standard, what you actually end up with is chaos. And that's what we're trying to avoid. At the moment, I mentioned earlier, it's working, and I don't think we should take away from that. And it will continue to do so while we are happy to have paper-based information that's being shared. And to some degree, some systems are very proprietary, which in a digital world just doesn't work. So at some point, we have to transition from that to a common language, and the common language obviously is global data standards. And if everybody transitions to the same set of standards, then your chaos is eliminated, and you can be guaranteed that the information that applies to the product in regard to the safety certificates or the accreditation is not only understood, but can be integrated within systems, so as you don't have to keep repeating the same information over and over again. You can use it from a single source, and this is a very important aspect of digitising this information.
Thank you. And Catherine, from a GS1 perspective.
Yes, definitely. Well, throughout the world, many countries rely on the process called accreditation as a means of confirming technical competence And so when we look at accreditation, it uses criteria and procedures specifically developed to determine technical competence. And the technical competency required varies from product, industry requirements. So we're looking at quite varied approaches depending on the products we're looking at. So JASAN's assessors are technical experts, specialists who conduct a thorough evaluation of all the components affect the outcome of the inspections and certification decisions against internationally recognised standards of conformance assessment. The conformity assessment process involves various different organisations in addition to JASAN's. They are the certification and the inspection bodies, the scheme owners, the regulators, all holding various pieces of information about the product being assessed. In the past, we may have been able to share information with trading partners and regulators by copying physical records, sending faxes or emails. However, the digital age demands a better solution for sharing more directly. We're asked for things in much shorter timeframes. It's almost instant that's required. And we need greater specificity about products. Information needs to be interoperable across various organisations and software systems, which demands the use of globally recognised data standards rather than a proliferation of various proprietary systems and blockchain requirements.
I suppose well, one of the things it's also worth mentioning is that a product can have more than one credentialing record. So it also underpins the importance of that digital sharing of information. So why now do you think why is this the right time for this report? And Jennifer, sorry.
Sorry, David, it's absolutely tipping down outside my office and I can barely hear anybody just at the moment. However, I shall press on. Look, we really, it is a tipping point. Sorry, as I said, it's tipping down outside my office. It's a tipping point. We need some action now. The other speakers have already mentioned the fact that we have a myriad, we could potentially have a myriad of proprietary solutions to this by establishing an agreed set of global standards that are applied certainly in Australia, but globally. It is the point in time where we have to act. Supply chains are global in nature. That's a fact. Whatever the supply chain is, whatever the product is, they no longer involve personal knowledge of the sources of supply. So trust has become a critical issue as part of this supply chain, of the challenges of international supply chains. At the same time, Catherine alluded to the fact that many aspects of supply chain data exchange are essentially instantaneous, need to be instantaneous, and they don't involve human intervention. For example, the digital tracking of products and financial transactions, they're instantaneous now. Australian exporters cannot assume that product attestations will be taken seriously when selling to competitive global markets if we are still relying on a buyer needing to manually verify conformity information and credentials. The message is really Australia cannot sit on its hands around this critical issue.
Well done, and well done in fighting against that storm. Catherine, hopefully you don't have a hailstorm out your way back in New Zealand. But from JASAN's point of view, why now from JASAN's perspective?
Well, I will use a weather analogy because the wind is blowing quite fiercely here. And I think we are in the winds of change. And that's what we're talking about. The Australian New Zealand governments established JASAN's in 1991. So we were 30 last year to strengthen the trading relationship between the two countries and with other countries. And over the intervening 30 years, JASAN's have played a leading role in developing and supporting industry and government regulators, ensuring the trust and confidence in the safety and quality of certified product. However, the rapid and change the supply chain, not just in Australia, but globally due to COVID-19. COVID-19 has turned us all right around 360 and again, is only one of several factors driving a rapid adoption of digitalisation and verification of product credentials and traceability. Australian producers and manufacturers depend on efficient and reliable data exchange that provides certainty around the conformance of products to the physical traded goods. This framework has evolved from the foundations of trusted conformity processes into the digital age. We're at the cusp of a major evolution in the way information is carried and shared through our supply chains via the use of digital labeling with links to product conformity information, and the potential for benefits are enabling a more efficient trade system.
Thank you, Catherine. Yes, and so Maria, Jennifer's getting rained out, Catherine's getting blown away. Down in Melbourne, from a GS1, what your perspective on winding up?
We've got the
weather report.
We've got the sun shining here. It's beautiful outside. Not that I've been outside, but it's lovely. Look, just from our perspective, why now? Well, there's a whole bunch of factors that that I could put on the table around that particular question, and why now is the best time to do it. But I think we have to take into effect the fact that we've got a COVID situation that has highlighted things that were already there. They weren't really at the surface. Supply chain resilience. How many times have we heard that throughout COVID? How many times have we heard the need for traceability? How many times have we heard the need to have visibility within the supply chain? Even the word supply chains. I mean, we've been, in Australia, very much on the crusade for efficient supply chains for the last 48 years or so. So, why is it now that all of these subjects and all of these terms have come to the surface as being so important and so relevant? Well, obviously the world is changing, and COVID has taught us that there actually is another way of doing business, and it's an easier way and a simpler way of doing business, and that's about the way that we're conducting this meeting, as an example. We're able to do it via technology that allows us to speak from all over the world, really, and still have these important conversations. So trade is exactly the same. You need to ensure that there is a common ground for being able to exchange that information. And the whole world throughout COVID has really taught itself that we need to be very open-minded and very accepting of the fact that our supply chains just are not as efficient as we would hope that they were. And in fact, today's consumers are not only demanding the product when they want it on the shelves, but they also want to have information about that product. They want to be able to trust that product. So the traceability data has become very, very important, and it's become important to be in a format that consumers can also access. So it's not just companies or customs or trade that needs to have that information, but it's also in a form that consumers can also use and make use of, because their decisions on what they buy are very much nowadays based on the traceability of that product and the knowledge about where that product has come from, and other data that they need as consumers to enforce that their trust in that particular product. So it is a time, because of COVID, that's brought a lot of these things to the surface, and it's made us all more aware of what's needed. But also we are in a state of wanting to be a lot more efficient in everything that we do. And efficiency means that you have to replace all the paper-based exchange with digitizing this information. And just like 50 years ago, when retailers got together and decided that they were going to put a single barcode on every product so it could scan at point of sale. And if there wasn't a common agreement at that point, then we would never have the point of sale systems around the world that we have today. It would not exist. And the only reason that that happened then was because there was complete collaboration and agreement on how it was going to be done. So you have to first have the agreement on the how, and then what needs to happen to make the how happen. And the collaboration that you see between us three in these three different organisations is a starting point to ensuring that we start to bring industry and government together. Because if we don't have the joint conversations with government and industry, then the report is fantastic. For those that haven't read it yet, please read it, and it gives a great framework. But it's a starting point. It's about bringing the conversation to the surface and making everybody aware of what needs to happen. But we have to actually take action beyond this. And that's the most important aspect, I think, of this report.
Thanks, Maria. And yes, as a user of a GS1 2D barcode, I can vouch for its usefulness for transmitting information. We've still got a little bit of time. I'll just an open question for all three of you. So what does the future of conformity assessment data exchange look like? And I'm happy for anyone to jump in and just with the observations and thoughts. And you're on mute, Jennifer.
Oh, I'm sorry. Look, one of the expressions that we use in accreditation frequently is fitness for purpose. And yes, there are scenarios where the current system of an essentially manual transaction of a test report between a laboratory and a user will be fit for purpose. But supply chains are complex and becoming increasingly so, as we've discussed. They're global, they are not linear, they are a matrix of participants. They experience challenges in misinformation, misapplied information, and fraudulent information. So for me, it comes back to fitness for purpose. Yes, there will be the scenario where the current system is perfectly fine, but for supply chains, it probably wasn't fine 5 years ago. It's certainly not fine today. So my vision for the future is exactly the scenario, the picture we're painting today.
Thanks, Jennifer. Catherine, from an accreditation point of view, what does it, do you think, looks like for JASANs and the future?
I mean, I agree with Jennifer. It's a fitness for purpose. But one of the things, or some of the things which occurs now, is the phone calls or the emails asking us to verify accuracy of certificates, whether they're recognised. Can we actually, is the laboratory that did the test a recognised laboratory? And so the future says that won't occur anymore. It'll be all linked and embedded, and people will know how to check that information, because at the moment we have phone calls from people who are lost, who don't know how to check things, and they need to know from and the difference is, with the world we live in, the product could be manufactured in Australia. Sorry, the final component could be in Australia, but the subcomponents may be manufactured in China. They may be tested by a laboratory in China, and then it comes in. So it's very difficult for end users to work out how it comes together. Is the component recognized? And so we would see the future is that the question's easy to answer because it's all together in a digital certificate of some form.
That's a really important point, because I think what you're talking about there is around having that technology enabler in the background to make it happen. And I suppose, Maria, that in terms of GS1 and not just about GS1 Australia, but more around GS1 Global, as the keeper of ISO data standards, that probably means it'd be interesting from your perspective around the future of data exchanges on the international front.
Yeah, exactly. And for us, as you know, David, you know, whether it's local or global, it's actually the same conversation, because we don't administer local standards or even industry standards. We administer global standards. And that's really, really important for any organisation to know that. So whatever investment they make, it sets them up to be able to trade globally. And never have to do it differently or do it twice. So that's a really important aspect. But we you know, the vision that you know, that I would see is very much that the complete set of data required to give trust about the product and give authenticity information about the product, and the fact that it has undergone compliance checking, and all the relevant data, that it actually resides on a label on the product and can be transferred electronically by simply scanning the barcode with your phone, because that's exactly what a 2D barcode would be able to do. You'd be able to pick up the phone and actually scan that and capture all that information, and that information would be interoperable, and it would be completely seamless, and no further action needs to be taken with it, because it is based on global standards. You wouldn't have to interpret it, you wouldn't have to exchange it or map it to something else. It would be exactly as it was put onto the label in the first instance, and then you would have achieved that seamless approach within the supply chain of exchange of that data. And as I said, the most rewarding thing, I think, that we have to consider is that it is of course in the trade process, but what you've done is actually given access to the end consumer to that data if they so need it. So it's the complete action throughout the supply chain and the supply process. So I think that that's a really important aspect of what would be enabled by using the framework that the report actually promotes.